Submitted anonymous. The tall, white humanoid. A little more than 3 years ago, I was hanging out with some friends and the topic of salvia came up. A couple of my friends who were younger than me had smoked it before. At the time, I'd been smoking cannabis regularly for 2 years and also had experiences with psilocybin mushrooms, dextromethorphan, and diphenhydramine. I knew that salvia was much more intense than almost any other substance, but I had to see it for myself. One friend's, friend B, description of his trip made me decide to buy some. He said every time he laughed, his head felt like it was made of pieces of Lego, which were falling apart. We went to our local head shop, and I purchased 1 gram of 20x Salvia divinorum. It came in a Ziploc bag with a sticker label on it, and the stuff looked like crushed spider legs. The girl behind the counter gave her mandatory spiel about using it in a safe environment with a trip sitter, etc. But as you will read later, we didn't exactly follow her instructions. After procuring the salvia, the four of us headed to our friend's house nearby. We'll call him Friend A. Our biggest problem, Friend A's mother, was an addictions counselor and wouldn't be pleased with us smoking disassociatives in her basement. Thankfully, via some sort of kismet, she had plans to go see a movie. So we sat on the couch and packed a bowl of salvia, mixed with a bit of weed, into a bong while we waited for her to leave. Soon enough, we heard the front door open and her car pulled out of the driveway. We're good to go. Since I'd paid for the salvia, I had dibs on the first bowl. I pulled slowly and deeply, making sure to burn the whole bowl. My friends stared with bated breath. I held the smoke in for about 5 seconds, then exhaled, which elicited gasps of dismay from the two friends. "You're supposed to hold it in, man. Now it probably won't work," they advised. However, within a few seconds, I could see things beginning to change. My friends' faces looked like some kind of blurry plasticine. I sunk into the couch and clutched its armrest with anticipation. They could see my expression changing quickly and remarked that I was obviously starting to trip. I looked in the TV across the room and was shocked I could see the entire TV. It was like I could see all 6 sides of the TV unfolded before me, including its wiry innards. My mouth gaped as I took all of this in. Friend C, A's sister, abruptly tried to grab a sweater I'd been sitting down on. When I felt the tug under me, I looked down. The space between the sweater and the couch was a void. Deep, black void that wanted to suck me in. I clutched the sweater into my arms and tried to stretch it back over the void. "I need this," I hissed. She laughed awkwardly and remarked that she was cold, but didn't try to take the sweater. And then, suddenly, I heard a familiar sound, like the slamming of wool and metal, but I couldn't understand it. Then, from the six-dimensional TV came a woman's voice. It shouted my friend A's name, and I saw my friends reel with terror. I realized that this was not hallucination. My friend's addiction counselor mom came home. "Fuck. What's she doing home so early?" Friend A remarked. Then I stupidly decided to try to speak. "She can't yet. I'm on the thing. Salvia." I mumbled flatly. I heard the basement door open. "Shut up. Don't say a word. Fuck, man," Friend B hissed. I tried to process this. "But, salvia?" I retorted. Upon hearing the footsteps and voice in the basement, it clicked in my head that speaking was not going to help me. I continued staring at the TV, which was off the whole time. Friend A's mother sniffed the air. "It smells down here. Have you been smoking in here, A?" Waves of trepidation. Every word she said seemed to come out of the TV, although she was actually behind me. Thankfully, A had not smoked yet and prepared an excuse. "No, I was burning incense. I mean, obviously, not the smell of cigarettes or anything, right?" A stroke of genius. How would she know what salvia smelled like? His mother glanced over. I continued staring into the morphing TV, refusing to make eye contact. After a few uncomfortable moments, she remarked that she had forgotten her wallet and was now late for the movie. She hurriedly left the house, and we all sighed in relief. My visuals started to subside. We waited for a few more minutes to calm down, and packed another bowl. This time it was friend C's turn. At 16, she was the youngest of all of us, and I don't think she had experience with anything other cannabis and alcohol. Therefore, we packed her a comparatively smaller bowl. Having seen my mistake, She knew to hold the smoke in until the effect started. Within seconds of smoking, I saw her eyes well with tears and an uncomfortable grin spread across her face. She laid back in her seat and put her hands in the air as if she was in a roller coaster. Soon she was laughing so hard she was crying. It sounded like she was trying to speak, but could not stop laughing. She was in complete hysterics. We all watched along with her as she screamed with laughter. Within a few minutes, she was wiping the tears from her face and explaining that she was actually on a roller coaster and ice cream cones were the passengers. She couldn't elaborate more than that. This seemed like a very light-hearted and fun trip compared to what I had seen on the TV. In light of her hilarious trip, I decided I would retry. I packed the bottom of the bong with weed, and filled the rest with salvia and sprinkled in a bit more weed on top for flavor. Looking back, I think I put about a quarter gram into the bowl. I cooked the bowl much faster this time. I was aware of just how short the bioavailability is. I held the acrid smoke in and saw the same plasticine face effects on my friends that looked at me. But this time there was a very strong rush. It felt ominous and there seemed to be a whoosh sound, like when one puts one's ears to a seashell. I could tell this time was going to be intense. And once again I laid back and clutched the couch. Then blackness. I opened my eyes to see that I was standing on the edge of a plateau. The ground beneath me was powdery and orange red, like Mars. The clear sky was a similar color, but more reddish. There were wisps of white clouds, but not many. I took a step forward towards the edge of the cliff. Far below me was a vast orange desert badlands sort of area. The ground was cracked and dry. I heard the whoosh again and looked upward. Several creatures were flying overhead. They were shaped like manta rays with very long dragon tails. They were dark shades of purple and blue with bumpy, leathery scales. I spoke their name, which, to the best of my recollection, was something like Quetzalcoatl. No, not Quetzalcoatl. It was as though I had seen these creatures before. They did not seem dangerous, but were worthy of my respect and appreciation. I made my way down the steep cliff face and into the Badlands. With the creatures flying overhead and a vast plain before me, I walked for what felt like 2 years. I felt myself age and grow weary, but I did not stop walking. Eventually, I reached a small, white hut. It was somewhat like a mushroom, fat, short, and round with a wider dome-like roof. It had a rounded entrance with no door and seemed very welcoming. I don't recall entering the hut, but my next memory is inside of the hut. Everything was stark white. When I looked around, I could not see an exit despite the fact the entrance had no door. Behind a white rectangular counter stood a tall humanoid figure wearing a white cloak. It was like a burqa. I could not see the figure's face. I slowly approached the counter. The figure acknowledged my presence with a laugh. So, what do you think? Its voice was neither masculine nor feminine. It simply spoke English words in their truest form, with no special voicing or accent. Despite this, it seemed to have an echo. I stammered, "What? Think of what?" It laughed very loud and mockingly. "The salvia! What do you think of the salvia?" I reeled with confusion. Salvia? This word seemed so familiar. I tried to recall how I'd gotten into this room, and briefly remembered smoking with other humans in a small room. I could not remember my friends' names or faces. The humanoid was aware of my confusion. It seemed to thrive on it. I gained momentary confidence and tried to voice my opinion on salvia, but I could not use my mouth. The cloaked figure focused on me even more intently and began laughing louder and louder. It knew I could not speak. I felt a physical barrier between my words and my mouth. I raised my hands to the corner of my mouth and pushed forward. As I moved the block-like barrier, I heard my answer escape from my mouth. "No!" The creature's eyes widened, and I saw the hut room rocket away from me. When I pushed the barrier away from myself, I had seemingly pushed myself into the realm of that block. I looked at the block I had pushed off of my mouth. It was labeled with the word "no." The same word I'd been trying to say. It was about an arm length away from me, and when I looked around, I could see other similar blocks with different words on them. It slowly started to move away. and it appeared to be a wall of keyboard like blocks, all of them with different words or ideas. I started to float backward, faster and faster. It wasn't a wall, it was a floor. No, it wasn't a floor, it was a plane. My mind reeled as I tried to take in all the ideas on the blocks. As I floated away, I saw the full scope of the block wall. It was a planet. I screamed. A planet made of thoughts, ideas, and words, arranged like a keyboard. I was floating away from the planet into the blackless space. No, 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 no. I continued to scream endlessly to no avail. Then it occurred to me. If I pushed the planet away by saying the wrong word, perhaps I could get back by answering the white humanoid's question properly. I shouted out loud my answer to its question. I could not hear my own voice, but I felt my mouth moving. Then I felt the gravity of the planet pull me back in, and I heard a familiar whoosh. I had reconnected to the ideas that made up my reality. For a few brief moments, I felt as though I was waking from a deep sleep. There was a blur of colors. I opened my eyes and the basement slowly started to fade in. I recognized the people sitting around me. They all looked very sedate. I turned to friend B, who was sitting next to me on the couch. His eyes were half open, and I could tell he was still under the effects of the salvia. It occurred to me that I had been speaking while tripping, but I couldn't remember those magic words I had said to bring me back to reality. I asked my friend, still somewhat slurred and hazy, what did I just say? They turned to me abruptly. Apparently, they hadn't realized I was sober again. What do you mean? They asked. When I was tripping, I was speaking. What did I say? Friend A replied, well, you spent most of the time screaming your fucking head off, which wasn't cool. His disapproval seemed inane, since I didn't even know I was on the same planet as him, let alone the same room. But at the end, you looked really serious and shouted, oh God, what is this? I don't even. I broke out in laughter. Those were my magic words? Well, it did seem to sum up the Salvia experience pretty well, and I suppose it appeared whatever part of my mind was represented by that cloaked figure. I asked my two friends what they saw, since I already knew that friend C had seen because she tripped before me. Friend A told me that all the walls seemed to peel back to reveal a layer of streaming numbers beneath. I suppose you could compare that to the Matrix. Friend B, despite being the largest of us all, had a particularly low tolerance for most drugs I had seen him take. He regularly tripped out when smoking weed, in his own words. This low tolerance seemed to factor into his salvia experience because he said it was very intense, but he could also not remember anything. After stepping outside for some fresh air, I managed to slowly recall my entire trip and recounted it to my friends. They seemed hesitant to believe that I could have seen so much in only 10 minutes, but I reminded them I'd smoked more than they had. All in all, despite the overwhelming intensity they had endured and the ensuing HPPD, which I have been living with, I look back on this trip fondly. It was certainly a breakthrough, and the most intense trip I've experienced to date. The fact that it felt like 2 years and the lifespan of 10 minutes is mind boggling. I tried to smoke the rest of the salvia a few weeks later with a friend, but none of us experienced anything. I would consider doing salvia again, but only in a much more controlled environment with sober trip sitters.